Is Utah still a Big 12 contender? And can they still reach the college football playoff? Also, what happened to the Utah defense against Arizona? A concerning sign or just a one-off bad performance? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media. You can follow our show on X at Locked On Utes today. And today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Elijah Grayson Murray of All Utes for Athlon Sports. And Elijah, unfortunately, it's a bye week, so we can't get that bad taste of a loss out of our mouths. But there's a lot. But what's nice about a bye week is it allows the team to sit back, reflect on what happened, get better, and it also allows us to sit back and reflect and examine what can happen moving forward. And sometimes it helps to take a step back after a disappointing loss like Utah had against Arizona. So that's what we're going to talk about this Utah team's outlook, Big 12 contender, CFP contender, what happened to the defense, and want to spotlight one of Utah's other fall sports programs. We are Locked On Utes, just not Locked On Utah football, at the very end of the show. But first, back to that question. Is Utah still a Big 12 contender? Absolutely, yes. You cannot overreact to one loss. This team is still 4-1 with a tough win at Oklahoma State. I know Oklahoma State just lost to Kansas State too, but the matter of fact is Oklahoma State, they're still really tough to beat at home. Over the last few years, they only lose one game at home each season. And it's still also a game that Utah won with a backup quarterback. Speaking of backup quarterbacks, once again, Utah 4-1 with a backup quarterback who has had some nice moments and some not nice moments, like a game against Arizona too. So if you look at this Utah team, I still feel like they are firmly a contender as we sit here right now. And some of the other individual reasons as to why, look, this Utah defense is still really good. Utah and Iowa State are the only two teams in the Big 12 yet to allow a team to score 25 points. Iowa State is the 11th ranked defense. Utah is the 20th ranked defense, but Iowa State is yet to face an offense inside the top 60 either. So that's something I still expect. I still think Utah is going to end up having the best defense in this conference. The defense is strong. We'll break down their performance in a moment. Yes, they need to make some improvements on offense, but the offensive line has gotten better. Mekhi Bernard's been a really nice surprise. They have weapons who can win on the outside. And Wilson is capable of making plays. It's also a Kyle Whittingham-led team. Just because you have one loss, Utah's had come out of way worse situations. Remember the 1-2 start from 2021? Yeah, it's not, the sky is not falling. There's some things to clean up. Utah is still firmly a Big 12 contender.
Yeah, 100%. And in the post-game presser, Kyle Whittingham obviously is not happy, but he was still very optimistic about Utah's chances of making the Big 12 title game. He was like, I don't see anybody going undefeated in this conference, and I think 1 to 2 losses on the year will still have you in the Big 12 championship game, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. This is one of the games that a lot of people had as maybe an upset alert game. Yes. And sadly that came to fruition, but it's good. If you have a positive spin on it, it's good that you're going into a bye with this so you can fix those problems before the rest of the season. And also, it's a tough schedule the rest of the way. Iowa State is hard. BYU is going to be a tougher game than most thought at the start of the year. UCF, going away for the last game of the season with a long travel day. That's not going to be easy either. So it's not like a cakewalk the rest of the way. But I feel if they can, fix their issues and get right what they need to get right, such as their tackling, I don't see how we still don't make the title game.
Yeah, I feel like this team, you're right. I think there are going to be multiple 2-loss teams in this conference. So then it's probably going to come to probably some 3-loss teams as well. Oklahoma State, they're obviously going to get another loss. Is Kansas State only going to lose one more game, right? Iowa State, yes, no, they had a big win against Iowa. I'm not debating that. The other 3 teams they played, not that good. So we're still waiting on the Cyclones to get tested. BYU, good win against Baylor. I thought there was a game they were going to lose full credit to the Cougars. I still have questions about that team because they also did let that Baylor team right back into the game at the very end. So it's not like I'm like, oh, BYU is this juggernaut. Iowa State is this juggernaut. There's no juggernaut. Even the Utah we thought was going to be the juggernaut clearly showed they're not. All of these teams have holes. They have weaknesses. Big 12 title race is still up for the table. And of course, if the Big 12 title is still up for grabs, then Utah can absolutely still make the college football playoff. And this is a Utah team that, look, if they're a team that I feel like they also control their own destiny, right, Elijah? If you look at Utah, they get to play Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, and UCF. All those teams, Colorado, Iowa State, and BYU, they're undefeated right now. So if Utah were to beat them, that's one loss Utah with then a head-to-head tie-breaking win over those other one-loss teams too, right? And UCF already suffered a loss, and I wasn't super impressed with what I saw from them against Colorado, was that they were a 14-point favorite. I know Utah was a double-digit favorite, but I'm just saying. And also, even if Utah doesn't win the Big 12 title, I still believe this is where I don't think a two-loss Utah team in the Big 12 title game, like if they suffered their second loss in the Big 12 title, maybe there's a chance they can get in. Going to be tough. The SEC is already starting to beat up on each other, though. Georgia has 2 losses. So when you get 3 losses, you're still going to be out of the playoff, in my opinion. I don't see a 3-loss team making it into this tournament. So that's where, as long as Utah, if they don't lose another game in the regular season, and even if they were to falter in the Big 12 championship game, if they're still playing and looking like an impressive team, I still feel like this Utah team is going to have an opportunity to be involved in the college football playoff. They can still get the auto bid by winning the Big 12, but if their second loss were to come in the conference championship game with the SEC and the Big 10 about to beat each other up even more, I still believe Utah can make it even if they weren't a conference champion.
Right. And, we've shown that we can compete with the supposed best of the conference in Oklahoma State. That was by some projected as the Big 12 title game preview. I don't know if that's how it's going to shake out now with Oklahoma State having their second loss, but even without Cam, we are still a very competitive team, and we still have all the assets to make the title game. I think this, while this loss does hurt, especially because, it's a night game. Rice Eccles is supposed to be a fortress at night, and it's against a team that last year embarrassed us. And but I don't think it's the end of the road. I think Cam will come back after the bye week and be back to his old self. Whittingham said that he was very close to playing actually against Arizona, but it was like a last-minute decision where Isaac played. And so, the team has shown that they don't have to rely on Cam to win. But I think it doesn't hurt to have Cam and that veteran presence back there. And I think if he's back to what he was showing at the start of the year up until the Baylor game where he got injured, I don't see how we lose too many more, or if we lose at all up until the title game.
I agree. I think this team, once again, they have everything in front of them. When Cam Rising is healthy, let's also not forget about what Utah's done, because, and I know I'm not going to say like Cam Rising is going to start this game because that's how we all got in trouble last time by projecting he was going to start. But the truth of the matter is he led 8 of 11 scoring drives. I'm not saying the competition was the best, but what's the goal of each drive? To score a touchdown. Utah did that every single time. So I still feel like this Utah team with Cam Rising and with Isaac Wilson is going to be a lot less likely. I would not project Utah to reach the Big 12 title game if it's Wilson the rest of the year, but I'm still not going to say like, oh, there's no chance, because we've seen this Utah team do improbable things before. So going to be fun to see. And just like I mentioned, all those teams that are on their schedule, Iowa State, BYU, UCF, Colorado, those are all teams that Utah's chance to get head-to-head wins against. And even Arizona, by the way. Let's not act like Arizona is a cupcake of a schedule the rest of the way. Texas Tech this week, we'll see how that goes. But then, go to Provo at BYU. That'll be tough. Colorado, that could be a shootout. 2 best quarterbacks in the conference, in my opinion, Fafita and Shedeur Sanders battling it out. West Virginia's been a nice surprise. You get UCF. You get some lighter games at the end. You get Houston. But even TCU, that game could be a little crazy in Fort Worth. And Arizona State, rivalry game, you never know. So let's not act like Arizona's punched their ticket for sure, too. The loss to Kansas State, not a conference game. So that is important to remember that doesn't hurt them. But I still feel like this is a good Arizona team. They're capable of making the Big 12 title game, but it's not, once again, they're not a juggernaut. We saw their weaknesses early. They've shored some of those weaknesses up, but teams will have film on them now post the bye week, and I'm curious to see how they get attacked. And speaking of the film, let's go back and look at that Utah versus Arizona film. I want to talk about the Utah defense because, look, we were all very frustrated by their performance. But I think going back and looking at it, I actually think the defense played a little bit better than it seems. Now, I want to talk about my reasoning for that take in one moment. But first, I want to take an opportunity to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Roy. It's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. You can download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code Locked On. That is all caps, but there is a space between locked and on, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstake to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. This week, I have selected Dorian Singer because he was incredible on Saturday. Sure, there was a time or two that Arizona was able to win their reps, but at the end of the day, he had over 150 yards. The massive play downfield in the second half, he single-handedly was generating offense for Utah. He is, huge for Utah these last few weeks. He does a great job going up and get the ball. He's a strong route runner. I got to be going with Dorian Singer as my player of the week, and that's why I'm giving him $100 through Roy. If you are impressed, as I was, with the performance by any of the Utah players on Saturday, you can show Dorian Singer some love too. Just hop on Roy now, throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just 10, it adds up fast for Dorian Singer. Now you have a chance to show your appreciation for Dorian Singer and his standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to do for our program. Get off the sideline and into the NIL game with Roy, or support the players. Change the game with Roy. All right, Elijah, looking now at this Utah defense. This is a Utah defense that after the game, we were all frustrated because what happened? They gave up long drives to Arizona. They let Arizona score some touchdowns in some big spots, and we were just frustrated all the way around by the performance of Utah. But when you take a step back and you look back at the film and you look at the way the game played out and everything happened, the Utah defense did not play that bad, in my opinion. Did they have bad moments? Absolutely. The missed tackling was a problem. We'll get into why in a moment. But Noah Fafita was spectacular and still threw for less than 200 yards. How about, yes, the running game? That's the biggest problem for me. Like, that's where that is absolutely a place where you got to be better. Utah let two running backs go for over 70 yards, over 160 total yards on the ground for Arizona when they rushed for less than 60 against Kansas State. That can't happen. We'll talk about why in a moment. But when you look at the biggest reason that Utah gave up 23 points to me, I do believe it was Noah Fafita. There were a lot of people saying Utah didn't get pressure. When you go back and watch, I don't agree with that. I think Noah Fafita was manipulating the pocket. He does not just sit in the pocket like Alan Bowman, the statue last week. Some of those long passes is him backpedaling, shifting around the pressure. Oh, Junior Tafuna, you're going to come inside. Boom, I'm moving to the left. I'm stepping up here. The final touchdown play, I'm rolling off to the right. That's an incredibly tough throw to make on the move. There is a small gap between his target and the end zone, and he's able to make it. Noah Fafita absolutely stepped up, made some great plays, some great throws. Utah has to clean up some of the stuff in the run game. I'll share more on what they need to do in particular in a moment, but I give Arizona's offense more credit than I do going abysmal Utah defense.
And, like you said, the pressure is not the problem. If the pressure was a problem, Fafita wouldn't have had to move around and manipulate the pocket the entire game. He could have just sat in the pocket all comfy and cozy and complete his passes. But he made it work, and he was incredibly effective, with his decision making. And while he threw for like almost half of what Wilson, threw for, he was more effective, and the throws that he made were game changing. Every single throw was calculated, and I think, the pressure was not the issue. I think tackling was the biggest issue. And Coach Witt also alluded to that in the post game presser. He was just like, we're missing too many tackles. It's the second straight week where we've had tackling issues, and we haven't had tackling issues for years. And so he was like that. He harped on that as being one of the main things that they're going to target in this bye week. And we'll get more information on how that's coming along tomorrow with the player press conferences. But I'm looking at the stat sheet here. Not a single player got double-digit tackles. Our top tackler was Teo Johnson with 9, and then Alaki Gilman with 8. And so it's just like what is going on with the tackling? The coverage, I think, was pretty impressive considering who you're going up against. There was some blown coverage, especially on the last touchdown that Arizona threw, and Taylor Johnson owned up to that. But I think pressure was probably the least of the defense's concerns as looking back at this game.
I agree. And you mentioned the two leading tacklers. Those are both safeties. Who are supposed to be your leading tacklers? Linebackers. Utah's linebackers did not play well in this game. The inexperience of Sione Fotu, I know he played some last year, but still isn't a full-time starter, still coming along, and as well as Jonathan Hall, who's even more inexperienced. And I really like Jonathan Hall. I think he's going to be a heck of a player. But him and Fotu were so frequently out of position. They kind of gambled and said, oh, here's the ball is going to come to the outside when it actually would come up the middle, and no one's there. Also, Utah's got to be better about getting off blocks. Keanu Tanuvasa and Junior Chifuna, if those guys are blocked one-on-one, they need to shed those blocks, and they got to make plays to keep those runs short. And they did do that at times, but a lot of Utah's biggest runs, they weren't able to. And Lander Barton's another guy too, right? There were a couple times that he allowed himself to get scooped up by a linebacker. And Utah defensive ends as well. I think it was Logan Fano more than Van Fillinger. There are a lot of times that they're running a counter or just they're pulling offensive linemen. They're coming across. From most of my football experience, you usually want the defensive end to crash down and take out the puller. Often what Fano was doing was running upfield. That pretty much takes you out of the play. Maybe Utah was coaching him to do that. But as I mentioned, because Fano did that, there's no one there to take out those initial pullers. So now rather than just one puller and a pile up, it's two pullers and no pile up. That's not ideal for a defense. So that's where I think Utah has to be better. And once again, I'm not saying the Utah defense was perfect. I wish they would have gotten stops on those key drives. But let's also just say this. Noah Fafita in Arizona, like Tetairoa McMillan is going to be a top 10 pick. He's a fantastic receiver. And Noah Fafita is an incredible talent at quarterback. And Utah held them to under 25 points. And the offense couldn't get over 25 points. There have only been two offenses that have really come into Rice-Eccles Stadium and had success in the last 2 years, right? It is Bo Nix, Oregon, and it's Noah Fafita at Arizona. Those are the two best quarterbacks that Utah has played. So you let an elite quarterback and wide receiver score just over 20. I think that's where the offense has to get more. I blame this loss way more on the offense's execution in the red zone and particularly in the second half, right? Isaac Wilson didn't play well. Players weren't able to get open. We talked a lot about this too. Did not like the play calling from Andy Ludwig. That to me was the bigger issue in this game than, hey, you let a really talented quarterback and wide receiver score 23. Because Utah also got more than enough stops, even off Wilson's interception. They hold him to a field goal. I still believe the defense did enough to win this game. The offense did not.
Yeah. And, after in the first quarter alone, we should have been up 21, and I think I talked with the media members about this. If you have Rising in that situation, the same yardage, facing the same, same schemes, but has the same play calling at his disposal, I don't think you convert with that either. The play calling was terrible in the end zone. It didn't give anybody any real chance of successfully completing those. I also think you got to take the points after you learn from your mistakes, and they didn't do that. They just kept going for it on fourth down. And I understand the chances are pretty high, especially when you have a 6'8" tight end who has only caught touchdowns in his career. But it's like, no, I think Ludwig's play calling for me was the most glaring issue in this loss. You can blame players, and I know a lot of people were mad at Isaac for throwing an interception and not completing whatever. I think he had a pretty impressive game considering the circumstances. It's his first start at Rice-Eccles Stadium. He threw for 280 yards. His completion rate needs to be better. It's 50%. But I feel as though he was not the issue, and I think if Cam's under center, we still lose that game because the play calling was so bad.
Interesting. I think if Cam was in, that Utah would have found a way to win. Well, I'll say a healthy Cam. I have no idea what version of Cam Rising we would have gotten. I feel like Cam would have bet a little bit better on ball placement and things of that nature, and that would have been the difference. But you are right. The play calling did not put Cam Rising or whoever would have been back there in a position to succeed. I think Isaac, I don't think Isaac played great because of the missed throws that we saw in the second half, but I do agree with you. He did a lot of nice things early, and there were also other reasons, as we talked about, like especially those fourth and shorts, you got to be able to move the chains, and that's where the play calling doesn't put you in a nice position on that run where you just run it right up the middle when you know that there's too many guys in the box that they have. So that's where I didn't like the play calling in that standpoint. And yeah, obviously Utah's offense has to be better. Isaac, the receivers, everyone in key situations, they faltered on gotta have it drives for Utah late. And that's why Utah lost this game more so to me than the defense. I'm not that concerned with the Utah defense after this game. If you want to talk about, hey, like if Utah's going to play and with like one of the best teams in college football, like offensive wise, then yes, we'll see how the defense fares in that matchup. But I still believe this is a Utah defense that can keep some of those other offenses under 30 points. Now you're gonna have to score 30 points too. And that's where we'll see if the offense can come along. So that's where the Utah football team is at. We got a lot more fun discussions about football to come this week. But once again, this is Locked On Utes. Yes, I pretty much always talk about Utah football. But I was looking at the other Utah sports, and I wanted to highlight some of the other successful programs. And I noticed something about the volleyball team. And 12-1, best start since 2013. Want to dive into some of the other crazy things that the Utah volleyball program has going on in one moment. But first, I want to take an opportunity to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, and that is our great friends at FanDuel. Are you guys excited for the NFL season? I know I am. And that's why you can start to get a big return with FanDuel. We're 4 weeks into the NFL season, and it's been so great having both college and pro football back. And FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. So when you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. What a wild weekend of Monday night games we had, and now we're coming up here on Thursday. We're going to see Kirk Cousins and the Falcons in action. And this week, yes, there's no Utah football, but there's still so many great college football games that you can take a look at. The SEC action, the Big Ten action, it's all heating up, and so is the NFL, as well as the MLB playoffs. That's why FanDuel is the place to be. You guys can head over to FanDuel Sportsbook and sign up for America's #1 sportsbook today, where you'll get a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com today. All right, wrapping this one up. As I mentioned, it's the bye week. This is the opportunity to talk about other Utah sports. We do this a lot with gymnastics and football, but I believe the Utah volleyball team has earned some love on this show. This team is 12-1, which is their best start since 2013. They earned big wins over Texas Tech, and they had a 5-set thrilling win over Colorado. Also, this Utah team, their lone loss is to Purdue, a top 10 team. And you also look at it. Guess what Utah's record was last year, Elijah?
Gosh, like below 500 winning percentage.
They were 11-19 last year. They are already past that, and just over a month into the season now, right? So that's where that's incredible. The job that Coach Beth Lanier has done. She's a legend. This is her 35th year with this program. She's won Coach of the Years, the Pac-12, the Mountain West as well. She's been a tremendous leader for this Utah volleyball program, and the turnaround has been impressive, right? You got players like Gabadlo has 151 kills, Marco 270 assists, Fletcher 126 digs, Satuala with 53 blocks. This team has come together. They already started off Big 12 play strong, and this just feels like the start of what could be a really strong season. This Utah team's been ranked a lot over the years, not the last couple of years, but kind of that 2019 to I believe 22 was where they had a great group. You know, it was Danny Drews, who was now overseas playing like she's one of the best, and she's sister of Lander Barton as well. The Barton family, obviously incredibly famous for their football prowess, but Danny Drews, one of the best Utah volleyball players that we've seen in recent memory as well. This volleyball team is a powerhouse right now, and they absolutely deserve some love for the start that they have had to 2024.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, it's always good to give love to the sports at the U that don't really receive as much attention. And, you know, actually, I was looking at the conference standings for volleyball from last year to this year. So Texas was the top team with the 17-1
national champs.
And they were the national champs. And so now that they're gone, the top three was Kansas and BYU. with a 14-4 Big 12 record and a 13-5 Big 12 record. And so just based on progression, you'd expect Kansas or BYU to be at the top of the conference. But then you look at 2024, and Kansas, BYU, and Baylor are up there with a 2-0 Big 12 record along with Utah. But Utah are 12-1 on the year, and they have a 8-game win streak, which is absolutely insane. They're undefeated away. They only have 1 loss at home and 3 wins, at neutral sites. And so they're looking primed to be the team that comes out of nowhere and just takes Texas a spot in the Big 12, or at least can challenge for Texas a spot in the Big 12. And so massive props to them for turning around their program so quickly, and giving Utah a great face in another sport in the conference.
Yep, it's going to be exciting to see how the rest of Big 12 play plays out. It's still weird, Utah being in the Big 12. I will say, just looking at the volleyball standings, being like, oh, Utah, Texas Tech, a conference game. And obviously we had that already with Oklahoma State, and it'll only get stranger with some of the ones late, like UCF. Back with BYU doesn't feel too strange, but like conference game against Iowa State, like that's where this is just going to take time to get used to. But it's an exciting new chapter for all of Utah's fall sports. And obviously the Utah football team on a little bit of a bye this week, Elijah, but if people want more Utah athletics content, where should they head over to?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter. I post all post-practice player interviews, and I also write about all Utah sport happenings. So with basketball season coming up, I will have all that stuff for you guys as well. So yeah, you can follow me on my Twitter, and I post all my links to my articles there as well. So everything is in one place. And I will also be traveling back home for the ASU game, so I will have content from that as well.
Awesome. Hey, bye weeks are always long because we got to wait a little bit till we get Utah football back, but can't wait to see that. And once again, Elijah, appreciate you stopping by. Always fun, my friend.
Thank you so much. Anytime.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We got a lot more fun stuff coming up, though. We're going to have Drake Toll on this week, talk about some Utah big picture stuff in the Big 12. We're going to be handing out some grades for how each position group has done for Utah, and also just talking about what Utah needs to do to get and maximize their quarterbacks, whether it's Cam Rising or Isaac Wilson. That's all coming up on a bye week for Locked On Utes. We stay rolling even though the team is off. Hope to see you tomorrow.